Hey friends, I'm so glad you're here. Today is going to be lesson 1 of my new film series, Let's Learn Film. I'm super glad that so many people are interested in learning film. It's a medium that really has my heart and is something that has kept me so in love with my job being a wedding photographer. Today's lesson breaks down to 3 main points: how to source or buy your very own film camera, where to buy your film, and how to get your film processed. If you're new to film and just stumbled along this video, or you're interested in learning film but you don't know anything about film photography, then I'll start with just a few basics. There are many different kinds of film cameras, but I specifically teach on 35mm film. If you don't know what that is, 35mm just relates to the size of the film that goes in each of these cameras. There's other films like 120, 160. There's a few older versions that aren't made anymore. But all you need to know is that this course is all about 35mm film. You might be wondering, why did I choose just 35mm film? Well, 35mm film tends to be a little bit cheaper than 120 film, which are the 2 main formats that are used today. Reason number 2 that I choose 35mm is that it's a little bit easier to load and unload because there's only one spool that winds out the film and then rewinds it back into the same canister. Whereas with 120 film, you have 2 spools, a used and an unused, and you spool all the film as you shoot to the other roll. I'm probably using words that you don't understand, and that's okay. Next video, I'll be teaching you how to load your roll of film and get shooting. But today is all about buying your first film camera, where to buy your film. You really can't sit down and learn how to shoot film unless you have a film camera sitting in front of you. You can look up videos, tutorials, or even ask somebody, but until you have your own film camera sitting in front of you, you won't know exactly what to do. So this class is going to be teaching you how to get a film camera in your hands, film in your hands, and really get started. Even though I only shoot 35mm film, there are many different types of 35mm cameras. I have a few right here to show you, just to go over some quick examples of the differences in 35mm film cameras. To start, I'm going to be showing you the classic fully manual 35mm film camera. There's many different types of these. Many brands make these cameras. I have another one right here. 2 major brands that I love to work with are Canon and Ricoh. But basically, this is not only a camera, but I like to think of it as a machine. There is a spot for batteries in the bottom of some of these cameras, and that's because they have a light meter. With film, you have to be very specific about what your settings are because there's no guess, test, and revise. You don't have a screen to look at to see if your photo is properly exposed, so you have to get your lighting right from the get-go. Because of this, some cameras have a light meter in them, which usually you can see by looking through the viewfinder, and you'll see it moving as you point your camera to different light. This fully manual camera is called just what it is because every setting on this camera you have to change yourself. When you get your film, you set the ISO based on what film stock you're using. You change your aperture right on the lens, which changes your depth of field and what's going to be in focus. You have your focus ring, which moves your focal point from forward to backward in the depth of field. And finally, you have your shutter speed, which is usually a dial at the top. Many of these cameras, like I said, that have a battery have a light meter, and I will definitely go into so much more explanation for this, but one helpful thing to look for is that your dial on the top has an A for auto, which allows you to set your shutter speed automatically based on how much light you're letting into your camera. So if you're shooting into a darker room, it might show a slower shutter speed, like 1/30. If you're shooting out a bright window or in natural light, it might show a higher shutter speed, like 1/500. 2 other types of 35mm film cameras that I have are a semi-automatic or auto-focusing SLR 35mm camera. This is going to be anything like the Canon Elon, the EOS. These cameras basically look a little bit more like your DSLR, but they don't have a screen. They are a little cheaper because they're mostly built of plastic rather than totally metal like most fully manual 35mm cameras. But these are actually quite a gem. I love my Elon because it has autofocus. It still has customizable settings like changing your aperture, your shutter speed. But the coolest thing about this lens, especially when you're just getting started in 35mm film, is that this series of cameras specifically is made for EF lenses. That means if you have a Canon 5D Mark IV, a Mark III, any EF lens will fit right on this camera. So you can bring your professional grade lenses to a semi-manual 35mm camera. This feels very similar to my digital camera when I'm holding it, when I'm shooting with it, but it still gives you that timeless style of 35mm film and keeps you shooting slow and moving slowly, capturing everything with so much more attention because you're shooting on film. We'll come back to this in a second. The final type of 35mm film camera is the point and shoot. This is one of my point and shoot 35mm cameras, and you see me grabbing this more often when I'm in a casual setting and want to be able to hand my camera to somebody else to take a quick picture of maybe me and my husband or my family. And the great thing about this is it's named exactly for what it is. It's a 35mm point and shoot. It has auto settings. You can't adjust your aperture, your shutter speed. It will grab focus and take the picture. It'll automatically revolve to the next spot on the film so you're ready to take the next picture instead of having a handle to move the film forward. Another really cool thing about point and shoot film cameras is that they tend to have a date marker on them. This means that at the top there's a little screen and you can program it to have today's date, and if you have it showing up here on the screen when you're taking a photo, it will stamp today's date on the bottom corner of your film shot. A lot of apps these days that are making photos that are supposed to look like 35mm cameras put the date marker in the bottom corner so that it resembles a point and shoot camera. You could also say that this camera is most similar to a 35mm disposable film camera because it's very similar to that. You can't really change any settings, you're just pointing and shooting. But the good thing about this is it's a little better for the environment. It's a little more personal because you reload this with your film rather than sending it off to be processed and never seeing that camera again. It is made of plastic, but because these are more desirable these days because of the date stamp and the vintage look, but with a quick learning curve, these have become a little bit more pricey. This specific camera was my husband's grandmother's, and I love it for that reason. I also love that these are a little bit more of a toy camera. You can see I've attached this smiley face and star little wristlet from Amazon to this camera that just makes it more fun. And this is just kind of that iconic film camera that a lot of people are wanting these days when they don't want to learn how to shoot film but still want to be able to take film photos. So let's finally talk about purchasing your first film camera. The first thing is going to be deciding which of these 3 types of film cameras you are going to purchase. If you are really excited to learn film, you're ready to continue to watch these videos, learn all the ins and outs about light metering, and want to be able to say that you proudly shot 35mm film and controlled all of the aspects, then you're going to be looking for a 35mm fully manual SLR. The cameras that I most commonly recommend are the Ricoh XRP. Again, totally manual 35mm, has an on and off switch just to turn the battery on for the light meter. And just overall a really cool camera. Another classic is the Canon AV1 or the Canon AE1. These cameras are pretty trendy, and maybe just because they're a Canon brand, you see more of these going for higher prices on eBay or different reselling websites. Another great option is the Nikon FG. Again, all exactly the same cameras made by different manufacturers, different companies. The Nikon FG, F2, or F3 are great options. And if you're not taking notes, I'll be sure to be writing these on the screen for you. To go over quickly a few more brands, there's Minolta with the SRT or the X series cameras. There's the Yashica FX series. These are great because, again, they're a less common brand that you might be able to find for a little bit cheaper. There's the Olympus OM series. And finally, there are the Pentax or contacts, which both tend to be a little bit more expensive when you're looking at purchasing online. So again, if you're not a name brand person and you just want to get started, I recommend Ricoh, Yashica, Minolta, and Olympus. One more time, here's a quick recap of all of those cameras that I recommend you look for on your search for your 35mm camera. If you're going fully manual, I would expect to pay around $100 to $200 for your fully manual used to 35mm camera. These cameras are vintage to the core. They are going to be used when you purchase them, and because of that, you want to make sure that you have a serious seller or a reliable source that you're buying from, as well as a returnable camera in case what you're purchasing isn't exactly what you thought, meaning it comes damaged or pieces of it that are very important to use the camera are not working. About 5 years ago, when I really got into shooting 35mm film, I began collecting, if you probably couldn't already tell. The biggest piece of advice I have though before purchasing your 35mm film camera is ask your family and friends. If you have grandparents, great aunts or uncles, or even a neighbor that lives by that is a great family friend, ask them if they have a 35mm camera sitting around somewhere. They might have it in their attic. They might not even know that they still have one. But if you can ask them to check around, that is a great way that you can get your first film camera and not only not have to pay for it, but get to carry on someone else's legacy by using their camera and giving it new life. The next type of film camera that we're going to be discussing is the auto SLR or the semi-automatic film camera. I only have experience with the brand Canon creates, which are usually the Elon series, but again, I love that these cameras are able to use my EF Canon lenses. If you're not as confident in your photography skills, specifically when it comes to setting your light with manual settings, ISO, shutter speed, aperture, then I kind of recommend that you look for one of these. When you're searching online, you'll be searching for a semi-automatic or an auto-focusing SLR. The great thing about these cameras when you're buying them used is that they tend to be a little bit cheaper than the fully manual. Like I said, they are made of plastic. Because you're usually buying them without a lens, since you can use your EF lenses if you are a Canon user, then these can usually run you between $30 and $70. I think I got mine for around $60 on eBay about 2 years ago, and it's been working great ever since. Finally is the point and shoot. If you want to get into film, but you're really scared because you're not a photographer or you really don't know anything about light metering or shutter speed, aperture, ISO, then I do recommend that you start with the point and shoot. This is really just dipping your toes into the realm of film, and it's a fun way to get started. Again, because film has surged in its popularity and point and shoots are probably the most easy film camera to use aside from a disposable, these can run you $100 to $200, sometimes more than $200. I definitely recommend asking your parents, grandparents, older neighbors if they have a point and shoot film camera lying around, because it's definitely better to get one for free than spending over $200 on a plastic, basically disposable camera. But I will say that I would definitely spend $100 to purchase one of these again if I didn't have one. I love my point and shoot. I love taking it on trips, and it's really fun to be able to pass around with friends or strangers and ask people to take your photo because it's fully automatic. I'm going to quickly share a few different famous point and shoot film cameras that have been iconic over the years and that you still usually can find on eBay or a resale site, and also put the list here. The Canon SureShot, the Olympus Stylus Epic Zoom, the Olympus Trip, the Fuji Discovery, the Ricoh SK, the Kodak Star, and the Nikon Light Touch Zoom, which is my favorite. Pause the video now if you want to write down these notes or take a screenshot of these point and shoot cameras. So now that you know which camera you're going to be looking for after deciding between the price ranges and the options that each of these cameras have for you when shooting 35mm film, we're now going to talk about what you need to look for in the listing. Some key features that you're going to want to be sure are listed in the description of the resale site or eBay that you're purchasing from are no fungus, no mold, no fog on the lens, and no balsam separation. Balsam meaning the type of glue that was used. All of these things can be summed up by saying clear glass or clean optics. Next, you're going to want to make sure that the shutter works. Most film cameras, even if they don't have film in them, should be able to release the shutter when you're pressing the shutter button, and you usually can hear it open and close. So this is a definitely huge factor. You need your shutter to work if you want to be able to take pictures with this camera. Likewise, you need to make sure that your film camera is light sealed. That means there's no cracks or damage causing light to seep into the canister where the film is being held and expose your roll. If that happens, again, you'll come up with a completely black or completely overexposed film roll and be left with nothing. So you want to make sure that in the description it says it's light sealed. And finally, my recommendation is that you also look for a description that says it has a working light meter. Yes, you could invest in a separate light meter, which is a small device, usually smaller than your iPhone, that you put batteries into and can test on any scenario of what you're about to take a photo of, metering the light, and it will tell you what shutter speed to use based off of your ISO and your aperture. There's also apps that do the same thing that allow you to hold your phone up and light meter what your camera on your phone is seeing so that you can adjust your manual camera. But I usually recommend buying a film camera that has a working light meter. The main reason for this is that when I'm shooting film, I'm completely away from all of my other technology, and I like to just be in that analog space. I like that I can just leave and use my film camera, not be checking my phone and getting distracted with notifications, and not have to hold anything else in my hands. When I'm shooting digital, I usually have several things in my hands when it comes to extra batteries, memory cards, a harness to hold the rest of my heavy equipment that I'm also carrying, sometimes even a backpack. So when I'm shooting film, I love to just have my film camera. I don't want to be carrying around my phone using a light metering app or a light meter, so that's just my recommendation. In the next video, when we talk about how to shoot your first roll of film, I'm going to be discussing more of what a light meter is and why I think it's super helpful to have a working one in your camera. Okay, to wrap up this section, we're going to discuss where you can look for these cameras. I have found great success in looking on eBay, but you do have to make sure you're very particular, looking for all of those things that I shared that you need to make sure are in the description. When buying used, especially from a private seller, you don't always know what you're getting, so I highly recommend that you are buying something that is returnable or that meets all of those specifications. If you don't want to purchase from a private seller and you'd rather trust a larger company, where you might spend a little bit more but can guarantee that your camera is going to come to you and be in great working condition, these are the other brands that I recommend. KEH, Adorama, B&H, or Camera Exchange. These are trusted, reputable companies where, again, you might spend more on the $200 to $250 range for a fully manual and maybe closer to $75 for a semi-automatic, as well as closer to maybe $150 to $200 for a point and shoot. But again, you can trust that the camera is going to come to you in working condition, and if not, you can return it. Whew, okay, that was a lot of words. This is why I wanted to keep this series very hyper-focused per video, because each part of this process of learning how to shoot film and shooting your first roll of film, getting it developed, has a lot of steps. I don't want to overwhelm you, so now that we've learned how to buy or source your very own film camera, we're going to talk about where to purchase your film. Thanks for watching part 1 of where to buy your 35mm film camera. Tune in next week for part 2, where we're going to discuss where to buy your film and how to get it processed. I'm Becca Grimm, and this is the series Let's Learn Film.